Hi, I'm Ben Bush. I'm an assistant professor of industrial design at Auburn University, and I'm representing my co-author Haley Cotton, assistant professor at the University of Alabama at Birmingham, and this is Design for Sharpening. If Haley Cotton was here, she would say, "In my own aha moments, I've come to realize that a difficult concept was presented in the same way multiple times. It wasn't until something changed the wording or they came from a different angle that things clicked." I want to start by talking about wordplay. Good metaphors can give insight and practical advice to a topic that you haven't learned yet. Essentially, it's a shortcut. Life is a highway. All the world's a stage, and all men and women merely players. You're as cold as ice. I've got that sunshine in my pocket. I've got that good soul on my feet. Wordplay grants me two things. I understand what you're saying literally, but also get an insight to how you feel. Haley would say, a metaphor, at its heart, is about taking a term of knowledge and paralleling it next to an unknown but similar concept in order to shed light on the unknown. When you use metaphor in the classroom, it allows students to access unknown concepts through familiar ones. And the more you use this technique, the faster students adapt the skill. And there was a time in my design teaching career where I compensated for lack of teaching skill. I would dress in all black, come into class, and put everyone and everything on blast. I tapped into an alter ego that allowed me to be ruthlessly honest. It stemmed from a lack of mentorship, a lack of experience, and it created problems with my instruction. And in my case, if you have a master's, you can jump straight into design teaching. No certificate needed. In addition, I soon learned I had lots of unteaching to do. Many of the foundations that were essential to design weren't covered in the public school systems. After teaching for almost a decade, I began to develop a way to think about teaching that allowed me to understand and communicate the design process more accurately. The concept comes from knife making. And to understand this metaphor, this shortcut, you have to understand the source. You can make a blade from any of these: copper, wood, aluminum, plastic, and it can cut. But perhaps the most important goal of a blade is to be useful over time. This is why most knife makers choose to work in the steel family. It has the ability to hold an edge once it's given. And even within these groups, there are better or worse combinations depending on how a person wants to use the knife. On to our next stage, shaping. Shaping is tough on the blade. It's brought, through pressure and heat, closer to its end goal. The process stresses and realigns atoms in the metal. It leaves it very hard, yet brittle, which leads us to the next phase, heat treating, where I'm going to talk about quenching and tempering. Quenching serves to lock the given shape into place instantly. The process of tempering heats the metal back up, softening it, and when it hits the ideal number, you let it cool back down. The Rockwell scale of hardness gives us a balance of hardness versus toughness. A harder blade can give you a sharper edge, but they're more brittle and prone to chipping. Tough blades, on the other hand, are not going to be as sharp, but they can be rehoned and are chip resistant. These elements might not be immediately apparent, but they are fundamental to how a knife works. On to sharpening. Sharpening takes time. It's a combination of technique and tool. The material is still undergoing change, but now at a much slower rate. For sharpening, lubricant is essential to ensure the longevity of both the knife and the sharpening stone. Without it, progress is heated and rough. And in order to be sharpened well, one needs to interact with different levels of sharpening stones, from the most coarse to the barely abrasive. And the knife is finished. But actually, there is no end. There must be maintenance. The knife will need to be rehoned every few weeks and eventually resharpened. The same is true with the equipment. No matter how good it is, it needs to be realigned from time to time. Either in industry or in the classroom, the goal is to produce superior works. A knife sharpener is valued on its ability to assign an edge. Let's talk about the application of the metaphor. Material. We don't get to choose our mediums. Design is not for every student. We want to develop and hold an edge, and the argument of nature versus nurture. We don't get to choose the students we get to sharpen. Our value as an instructor is not based on the best student, but by the level we can improve each and every student in our classroom. Each student needs to define an intersection where their passion and their perseverance collide. Design isn't for everyone, but if it is, you need to remember your principles and who you're designing for. Take the Varda Hotel in Las Vegas, for example. A concave design created a heat ray that heats the pool to temperatures up to 107 Fahrenheit, 42 degrees Celsius. That's hot enough to melt plastic bags. And not all good design students come from traditional design backgrounds. Is it nature or nurture? Maybe it's a lot of both. Have you ever wondered what type of childhood it takes to produce a chef's table type of chef? Yeah, me too. Let's talk about shaping. Our high schools rarely teach creativity. We operate in a project-based world, the importance of iteration, and failing quickly and failing often. Simply, our high schools aren't set up to prepare students for creative professions. We live in a project-based world. The quarterly report, adding a backsplash to the kitchen, planning a birthday, memorization, fill in the bubbles, don't talk to your neighbor. These practices cause uphill battles in our design classrooms. Bad news, there is no future. Good news, there's multiple futures. And if this is the case, wouldn't it make sense to plan for multiple outcomes? Designing for future wants and needs can be hard and frustrating. It stresses and realigns the metal. And in my world, there is rarely a right or wrong answer, just more better and less better. Failing early and often is a powerful learning technique. No master knife maker got to be a master overnight. It takes time, perseverance, and mistakes. On to heat treating. Design requires toughness, grit. Ideas are important, but not special, and reflection locks in the learning. It's tough to work on something for weeks, present it, and hit your steps were incorrect. We need voices that help sharpen our thinking. Yes, design students need talent, sharpness, but more importantly, they need grit, toughness, to try again to work through their problems. They need to persevere. You ever wondered why 409 is called 409? It's because it took 409 tries to get it exactly right. And the hard parts of design school can be intense. We demand that students explore vast opportunities, to explore all the features. It's also important to back off, reflect upon decisions that were made, revisit the design principles. It's the balance, the tempering and the quenching that locks in an edge and makes it useful over time. And then sharpening. We got to seek out diversity of thought and learn how to work through the ambiguity and avoid educational silos. The more times a student can be sharpened, to be improved little by little, the better. If students learn from a wide diaspora of people, i.e., they come in contact with multiple sharpening stones, they will be better engaged in and prepared for a diverse world beyond the university. Students need to be exposed to and manage opposing ideas, deal with the ambiguity. The ultimate goal is to teach them how to think, to become shelf-sharpening knives. We also need to avoid the Facebook scenario, where everything you read and everything you take in aligns with your current views. We need faculty that can share the podium and not be the only voice in the classroom. And then finishing. Finishing turns out to be an incorrect word. Truly, the sharpening process is never complete. The process of teaching and learning are never complete. A better name for it would be upkeep, where wear and tear are universal. Lubricant can improve longevity, and knives need honing, and stones need resurfacing. The goal is to become a self-sharpener. Go out, learn. Students and educators need to find opportunities to grow. If you ever stop learning, stop refining that edge, you become irrelevant. Lubrication is essential. If a student is convinced that you don't like him or her, you can't teach them. Professors need to find ways to communicate with their students so we are all on the same team. We need to emphasize soft skills. People don't like to eat with people they don't like. It's super important for students to find common ground with each other. I've been known to pair students to bring in snacks that match the presentation. And it may sound silly, but food and meal prep can be the backbone of any team. And we need to operate in an atmosphere of grace. Real change comes through vulnerability. And professors need to go on sabbatical, go to conferences, pursue personal interest. Don't wear yourself out. It's important to step back and realize why you chose teaching. A worn-out sharpening stone doesn't sharpen very well. And then the reward. You didn't get an education for the money. Engage in abundant optimism and never stop sharpening your knives. Obviously, professors get into teaching because of how much it pays, right? I don't have to tell professors this, but cherish the successes of your work. When your students succeed, it's because you help them gain value and had an impact on their life. Communicate that you expect the best out of your students, not only academically, but as a person. Our desire is for them to grow. It's to think for themselves and elevate in their career. We don't sharpen blades so they can be immediately returned to the knife block. And teaching is an optimistic sport. Part of this abundant optimism is we see the knife, not as it is, but as it will be. If knife-worthy material can come from the unlikeliest of places, a lawnmower blade, a wrench, a railroad spike, why should anyone limit where their tool ends up? A ton of effort, time, patience, and perseverance goes into crafting a student. And it's a distinct honor to see what they accomplish when they put their edginess to use. So get out there, make your own metaphors, and expect greatness out of yourself and your students.